So Terry, thanks for joining us. Like I said, I know you're probably in your first week or so of retirement after a long career in the industry. Is that right? You're officially retired now. Is
I
that
am officially tired, and this is my first week. That is correct.
and what are you doing this first week? May I ask?
Well, I'm cleaning up a few things from work. I actually went into work this morning, unofficially, but just kind of getting things lined up for the next phase of my life.
Okay, great. We'll talk about that. But 3P processing. Tell first of all, let's just go back at people that may not know. Tell us about 3P processing and what all you all do. You're a fairly large operation. I know you worked with some very sophisticated companies over the years with that. Tell us
Yeah,
about that first.
3P processing came into existence in 2012, but the company started back in 1974 as Air Capital Plating. It was run by
Mm,
some local guys there. They started in a small shop. They just kept adding on, buy the next building, buy the next one,
mm,
build in between. So it ended up at about 115,000 square feet. We acquired more
okay.
buildings right beside us a few years ago to add another 15,000. But then as COVID hit, we never did expand into it. So now as things are picking back up, they're looking at knocking some walls down and making some additional square footage
There
for
you go.
facilities. So it was a premier processing back in the day. NADCAP came along. The owners sold the company to a machine shop. Uh, the industry didn't
Mm,
really like that too much because the competitors were sending their machine parts to another machining house that had processing capabilities. Uh,
hmm
that company got into a little financial problem after 9/11. So some private equity guys bought them out. It was called Next Tech Aerospace. We were Next Tech
hmm
Processing. 2012, they decided to divest the machining division and wanted to keep the name. They never did use the name, but as a result, we changed the name to 3P Processing. We had a contest with our employees and said, what do we do here? We process parts. We're all about performance, and we're here to be your problem solver. So that's where the 3Ps came from.
There it is.
So,
It's pretty simple. It means a lot. So yeah, very resonates with that. So definitely, yeah. Oh, you spent, I think, what? I think it was 17 years there. Is that
18,
right? About
18 years there.
18 years. Tell us what you did. Something you were with a couple major OEMs
So,
manufacturing before that,
Right.
right? Tell us about that. How you got this?
I started at Boeing in 1986 as an engineer, mainly
Mm,
MRB. I did some design work on a 737. I didn't like sitting behind the CATIA machine and
mm,
designing parts. So one of my supervisors, I was wanting to get into management. So I ended up going back and getting my MBA. After I got my
mm,
MBA, there wasn't a lot of turnover at Boeing here in Wichita. At that time, there was
hmm
about 25,000 employees. We had about 125 MRB engineers. So it was it was it was a long process to kind of move up in the company. So after getting my MBA, I went over to Honeywell, got
hmm
out of airframes and went into avionics. I spent about
Okay.
9 years there. Uh, Built a new building here in Wichita, and there was they like to move their GMs around, and I wasn't ready to leave the Midwest, so I looked for a new job, got out of the big corporate world, and went to work for a private equity company, and
Mm.
that's how I got into the processing world.
Gotcha. Had you known much about surface finishing at that time,
Well,
though? Or
when you're a design engineer and you get done with the part, you basically give it over to the MP&S engineers and they tell you how to finish it. I did some
mm,
MRB work at Boeing, but it was mainly chem milling at the time.
hmm
Something would go wrong. So I wasn't real familiar with it, although when I was at Honeywell, we used to send our actuator rods over to Air Capital Plating to be mag inspected
okay.
for cracks. So I knew about the company, but I didn't know that much about the actual industry. I was familiar with specifications being from Boeing, and that helped me spool up faster maybe than a normal person that didn't have the engineering background.
Right, right. Yeah, I was going to say, and it's funny because now it seems like you're kind of on both sides of the fence as a the vendor and the supplier, and now you're in the finishing. I mean, you kind of know how. I guess that had to be a tremendous asset to know how those things operate, how both sides operate,
I
right? I mean, so,
I think my staff had told me, they go, nobody had ever been an engineer that came to work for them. They didn't know the specifications. They didn't know how to read drawings. I would push back on some of the engineers and the customers on what they were wanting, and it's not called out on the drawing. Where's the requirements coming from? And so, yeah, I think that was a big asset for me to know the background behind it. The unfortunate
mm,
part was, as I talked to people that still worked at Boeing out there, which turned into Spirit, we were doing this for 18 different OEMs. So I had to learn the specifications for Cessna,
right.
Gulfstream, Lockheed, Sikorsky, where those guys were just still doing, one specification. I said, Matt, you have no idea that each OEM has their own recipe.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say you pretty much. Like I said you had all of them, right? You had, like I said, 18 or more. I mean, you had pretty much everybody in the aerospace and aviation industry. You guys were
Yeah.
pretty much working for, weren't you?
Yes. There's still
Yeah,
a couple
I was
out
gonna.
there they're still working on right now, but for the
Mhm.
majority, we had them all.
Right. Yeah. And I know, I talk to finishers all the time. They, under their breath kind of, grumble about, aerospace and those things. How do you juggle 18 or more of those companies, who are sort of, biting at you sometimes? How do you deal with all that? How do you get everything so that you can, satisfy them and do the job they want you to do with
Well,
that?
you can see by how much hair I have left. I had a lot more when I started there. Uh, we lay all the specifications over the top of each other, and then just slice a piece of pie out right down the middle that we hit all of them, and then
Hmm.
we set up all our internal controls to play in that range they give us. There's sometimes where we can't meet that requirement, and we have to not do it. Other times we'll try to submit deviations.
Yeah, one thing I was going to ask you is two things. Well, two things I wanted to ask you about. I know that I know I've written about you guys a couple years ago. Right after you started, I mean, you guys went on a real big. You doubled your sales over the next decade or so. How did that happen? How did you put all those moving parts together, so to speak? No pun intended, but to get that to really jumpstart that business and get it, like I said, double sales like that. It seems.
Well, when I first got there, you know, the aircraft and defense OEMs love clean water, so our capacity constraint was RO water. Uh,
Mm,
so we had like three little RO machines, and we had storage tanks for those. So we'd run during the week. We couldn't be open on the weekends because we had to make water for the next week. So
mm,
we put in a 50 gallon per minute RO machine, uh,
wow.
and the OEMs love their clean water. So we're cleaning that stuff down to 10 parts per million.
Mm,
Gulfstream especially loves clean water. And once we
hmm.
put that system in, we were able to run our anodizing line a lot longer and faster and on the weekends. Uh, so we just kept adding more capacity from. Uh, I could anodize faster than I can mask and paint the parts. So when we talk
Right.
about growing revenue, when I first got there, we had like 10 maskers. Uh,
Hmm.
and during COVID, we geared up the company. We went 7 days a week. Uh,
Mm.
we never ran the anodizing 7 days a week, but we had three shifts running that 5 days a week, and then we were
Mm.
painting and masking, and we had over 65 maskers. There was
Wow.
so much masking. And one of the biggest trends, I was part of that lean initiative out at Boeing when they took all of the dot codes away from the mechanics out in the shop and moved all the masking down to the detailed parts, and that really changed,
Mm-hmm.
the flow of parts and where all that work took place. And that was one of the biggest changes I saw in the industry, is all the masking requirements. And now, of course,
Right.
Sikorsky, Lockheed, and everybody is on that bandwagon. So
Right.
that
Right.
the RO water was, and then we put in another 50 after that,
Mm. Wow.
and
Wow.
we put in it. In addition to that, once you start making more water, then you also have to get rid of it. So then
Right.
we had to put in a new waste treatment
Treatment.
process. And we
Mm-hmm.
put a DI system over there that could recycle 100 gallons per minute system. Now we couldn't recycle all our water out in the shop, but
Mm-hmm.
the heartbeat, the machine, besides that anodizing line, is making sure you have water for it.
But you have the water for it, right? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean that's like you said, and really like obviously you had systems in place and quality systems in place that they really appreciated. And one thing I was going to ask too is that I think I saw where during that time you all had almost had well over 300 people at some point, right? I
Yeah,
mean, you all were really, which put you up in the top five, I think, anywhere in the country as far as employees
yeah,
in a facility like
yeah,
that.
we had 320
Mm,
right before the COVID pandemic hit, and then after that, we
right.
went clear down to 120.
Gotcha. So you as a manager, you as the leader of the leader of the company, how did you learn to adapt to manage that many people? The span of control, it's not like you just keep walking the floors. I mean, you had to have delegation and things like that. What was your theory and your practice on getting everything managed and getting the right people overseeing these operations then?
Well, we promoted mostly inside the
Hmm.
facility, but we just we had a robust management review process for employees, coaching them. What do you want to do in the future? Some people didn't even want to be leads, and it's like, you want
Mm,
you know growing with your family and supporting your family. So I had a strong set of supervisors. We're a very lean organization, so uh, it was myself. We had a production manager, we had a business development manager, and then the supervisors. So I was only one level away from the supervisors.
mm,
We do Gemba walks in the morning at 9 o'clock to go around the
right.
cells. I was
Hmm.
out on the floor a lot with the employees and the supervisors, helping with their problems. Uh, Helping him interpret engineering. And we it was I look back on and you ask that question, I'm kind of surprised myself sometimes when I'm like, how did we do it with that level? But it was a production manager and supervisors for each shift, and they usually have a couple of areas. The paint supervisors would have 10 to 15 people. Some of the maskers had up to 30 people.
Wow.
I just built a strong management team, and we pushed through it. And
Right.
the more work we got, the more we sent out.
Right. I was going to say that, and it seems to happen that way when you have a good system. Is that the more work you get, the level of quality it grows right along with it.
So
It does with that.
we,
Thinking it back, like I said in your career, one of the questions I was like to ask is who were some people that really influenced you, mentors or people that you really really helped you and guided you and were there when you had a question about things that who were some of those people
well,
if you can recall
well,
those.
my first supervisor at Boeing, his name was Paul Shaw. Not Paul Shaw,
Hmm.
Paul Miller. I'm sorry about that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
he just, engineers can get a little big headed, and think they walk on water. And he's like, we put our pants on the same way everybody else does. And he kind of grounded me, going, the guys out in the shop are the ones building the airplanes. You could, so when they had a problem, I'd go talk to them, not down to them, but we'd discuss how we were going to fix the problem. I think that was
Mm.
very influential to me. I had Neil Speranzo at Honeywell. He was
Hmm.
my boss. He was very tough on me and made me grow up once I got into management.
Right.
And then I had Tom Gibbons and Neil Bishkin at Next Tech Aerospace that hired me there.
Right. When you started there. Yeah.
They
Right.
they first came in and they were telling me what they wanted me to do, and I said, if you know what needs to be done, why did you hire me? So let me have an opportunity to run with the ball, and if I'm not doing what you want, then come tell me what you want. And they're like, grow sales and grow EBITDA. And I brought metrics along with me from Boeing and Honeywell, and when we go visit customers, there was not a lot of metrics in that
Mm.
supply chain. It was all feelings about, all processes are always behind schedule. We implemented metrics so that when we went and talked to them, as an engineer, I have to talk in facts and not feelings. And
Exactly.
that was a big turnaround. Boeing came in and like, what? No processing house has metrics. Where'd these come from? I was like, well, we have metrics, and that was
Right.
part of our growth. When we went and visited customers, we had their metrics for them, and we could show them how many orders they were working, how many expedites, what their sales were, and what
Hmm.
could we do to help them grow. And most machine shops, they want to grow just like any other business. So like we want to help you grow. And if so, on time delivery, turnaround time, uh, that was our metrics that we were driving to.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I know the more successful companies I hear, they kind of repeat what you just said, is that they rely on the numbers and they understand the numbers. They act on the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Right.
And
It's the facts. Right.
if you lie to yourself and fudge your numbers, you're only fooling yourself, because your customers
Right.
know, they know the
Right.
truth.
Right, exactly. And you're dealing with, like I said, one of the most sophisticated industries out there, aerospace and those type of things. I mean, it had to be where every day you couldn't lie to yourself, you couldn't lie to anybody else. You had to face facts, even if it was bad sometimes, right? I'm sure
Correct.
to make it right with people with that. But yeah, like I said, it sounds like I said, you had some people there that really influenced you. Like you said, being tough on you, but also showing you the way
And when
sometimes.
and when I got over there, there was a guy there that was part of the original team that started Air Capital Plating. His name was Charlie Cravens. Uh,
Hmm.
he was a legend in Wichita. Everybody
Mm.
knew him. If you were having problems with anodizing, he could go out and he was just a legend, and I learned a lot from him. He was actually GM at the facility, so I was sitting in his old office, and he'd been there a long time, and rest in peace. He passed away a few years ago. He was in
Hmm.
his 80s. He was still working for me, and he said he wanted to pass away in his office at the shop. I said, Charlie, that's not what I want. But he passed away coming to work in the morning. He sat down in a chair and passed away. Coming.
Really? Wow.
He was a big
Prophetic there.
he was
Yeah.
a big influence for me at the shop.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, wow, that's interesting. It's funny. Like I said, as you know, over the years, you look back on things and such. And what advice, because I talk to a lot of people who sort of, manage shops, manage facilities. One of the things I hear from them all the time is, it's not like they can call somebody across town and ask questions, or a competitor or anybody like that. It's an industry where you're really not going to get a lot of help from your competitor on things. And you're almost like you're alone at sea sometimes, right? Of figuring this out and getting it going. How did you cope with a lot of that, of kind of fixing some of the issues that might have come up, when you didn't have a big resource of maybe calling somebody else in the industry who's been through that? But unless you did, I'm not sure.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I really didn't, but there we have very low turnover at that shop. I learned
Hmm.
a lot from Charlie and the supervisors that had been there for a long time, and I asked a lot of questions, and I read a lot of specifications uh, to understand them. Uh, Boeing were the easy ones for me, as I said before, but just going out. I'm a big process guy.
Hmm.
And when things weren't going right, it's like, what's the specification say, and what's the process? And
Right.
the guys that left my org on to other places, they're like, the one thing you drove into our head was, what's the process? I said, you cannot solve the problem. You don't identify the problem and identify the solution without understanding the process, because all you're doing is guessing or a shotgun approach. So
Right.
that was my biggest
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, what advice would you get? Let's say, somebody in Texas or Florida or California or Colorado who's, they've now become, the head of their operation. What advice would you give somebody who's taking over an operation like this, where really details are important, knowing your numbers, knowing the processes? What advice would you give them on that, from what you've learned?
I would say be patient in your journey, because you're not going to learn it all in one day. There's tons of specifications out there. Ask your employees. Don't ask for their opinion when you see something. The engineers aren't at these OEMs. They're not willing to change specifications. They've been that way for years, and they have a tendency to be stuck in their ways. So be patient, ask a lot of questions, and think about the process. If you're having rejections, like, follow the process through the shop.
Right, exactly. You'll pretty much find out where the issue might be, where the bug might be on certain things with it. And like you said, gimbal walks all the time, every day, of really trying to solve problems so they don't last another day, right? You get rid of them right away. You get rid of the problems.
My supervisors were very good at fixing the order and getting it out the door. And I said, that order is going to come in next month. So don't just fix the order, fix the process, so that next month when it comes in, it goes out the door without having a defect.
Right, exactly. Exactly with that. Kind of finishing up here, I guess. What were some of the, when you look back, what were some of the, your fondest memories, highlight that really stuck out? Maybe a day or a project that really made you really proud of what you guys were doing. Like I said, very, very important. And I don't think a lot of people understand how finishing is so important in the manufacturing process of everything. But what were some things that maybe stuck out to you of what you guys were able to pull off and do over the years with that?
Well, there was a couple of things that, as I look back, I started at Boeing in June of 1986, and now I'm retiring 40 years later in June of 2026. A lot of things have happened over those years, but my time at the processing facility that was the longest part of my career. So I had built a brand new facility at Honeywell. I mean, it was beautiful, ESD, and processing houses aren't all that beautiful inside unless you build a brand new one. So I visited the shop twice and go, what am I doing? I'm leaving a facility that has ESD floors and you can eat off of it to this facility that needs a lot of work. I made the jump, and 2 weeks after I was there, I'm like, man, I made a big mistake. I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know if I am ready to take this on. And I had a lot of thinking around it, and I said, well, I made my play. I have to go now. Looking back, and the way the shop looks now compared to the way it was then, going from 140 employees up to 320, and we tripled our revenue from back then. Just that, I'm very proud of that piece of it. And then another piece that I was Boeing. Our relationships with the OEMs aren't direct; they're with our machine shops. But Boeing started a team to come out to talk to the processors, and they came out to see us, and they said, "Hey, can we stop in the shop and talk to you?" And we met with them, and I said, "How many shops have you visited?" And they go, "You're the first one, Terry." I go, "I'm the first one." They go, "You are the first one. We consider you one of the top 10 processing houses out of our 1,800 facilities." And I'm like, can I record that?
It's very discerning, because they don't give applause like that. A lot of people.
That was a very humbling. And I said we've been working hard for all these years, and we are recognized in Everett, Washington, and the Boeing Company.
There you go. Yeah, definitely. Well, Terry, I appreciate this. Appreciate you taking time out, and what a great career you've had. Like I said, and the one thing I always tell people, you grew the business, right? You made a lot of money for people that owned it, but you also helped get a lot of people jobs and their families. And, when you go back and count how many probably kids went to college or people bought homes because of the business that you oversaw, that's pretty substantial. I mean, that's a huge chunk over, like you said, 2 decades that you did that. That's a huge accomplishment for anybody. So congrats to that. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I appreciate that. I had my last speech, and I told them, I said, I during COVID, I would lay at night and think about how do we keep all these employees going. We don't want to lose them because we know it's going to come back. And the employees at 3P Processing were part of that journey, and I didn't know everybody by their first name, but I knew their faces. But yeah, it was a great journey, and I'm proud of what we accomplished, and look forward to that things are heading back up, and the work is there, and I think they'll get back up to 320, if not 350 employees.